When my own daughter looked me in the eyes and said, "I don't need you anymore, mother. I me continue out of my life in my inheritance, e felt my world collapse beneath my feet." Days later, I was sitting across from a lawyer who showed me a document that would change everything. That's when I realized life is like a deck of cards. Just when you think someone's dealt you the losing hand, there's always an ace hidden up your sleeve. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're from in the comments. Because trust me, this story twists more than a hurricane on the Florida coast. My name is Julia Vanetti, and for 62 years, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I'd been through a painful divorce, survived the death of my husband, and weathered more business storms than I care to count. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day my daughter Clara decided I was disposable. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind where rain taps against the windows like impatient fingers. I was in my study, reviewing the quarterly reports for Vanetti Enterprises, the company I built from nothing but determination and sleepless nights. The business that was supposed to be Clara's legacy someday. I heard the front door slam, followed by the clicking of heels against marble. Clara always walked like she was on a mission. That day, her mission was to destroy me. "Mother," she said, standing in the doorway of my study. Her voice was different, colder than I'd ever heard it. "We need to talk." I looked up from my papers and smiled. Even at 35, with her sharp business suits and calculated expressions, I still saw glimpses of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" Clara didn't sit down. She remained standing, her posture rigid, clutching her designer handbag like it contained state secrets. "I've been meeting with the board members," she said flatly. "They agree with me that it's time for you to step down." I put my pen down slowly, trying to process what she was saying. "Step down. From my own company. You're getting older, mother. Your decisions have become questionable. The board feels." "The board doesn't run this company," I interrupted, feeling heat rise to my face. "I do. And eventually, you will. Script part separator equals. That's just it, mother. Eventually isn't soon enough for me anymore. The word zung between us like a physical thing." I studied my daughter's face, searching for any trace of the woman I thought I'd raised. "I've secured backing from investors who believe in my vision, not yours," she continued. "I'm prepared to buy you out. The paperwork is already drawn up." She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope, tossing it onto my desk with casual disdain. "You're forcing me out?" "Imanage toeski, my voice barelha bovia vispir." Clara's laugh was sharp, like breaking glass. "Forcing you? Please, mother. I'm offering you a comfortable retirement. Most people would be grateful." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The numbers on the page swam before my eyes, but even in my shock, I could see the offer was insultingly low, a fraction of what the company was worth. "This is robbery," I said. "It's business," she replied coldly. "And if you don't accept, I'm prepared to call for a vote of no confidence at next week's board meeting. I have the votes, mother. One way or another, I'm taking control." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Years of sacrifice, of missing birthdays and holidays to build something that would last. Also my daughter could have a better life than I had. And now she was using everything I'd taught her to cut me out. "Why?" I asked, hating how my voice cracked. "What have I done to deserve this?" Clara's eyes hardened. "You've held on too long. You built this company, yes. But you're stuck in the past. The world has changed, and you refuse to change with it. I can't wait around forever while you cling to outdated ideas." She glanced at her watch. "I need your answer by Friday. Sign the papers, take the money, and enjoy your retirement. Or fight me em de los e everything." Before I could respond, she turned and walked out, her heels clicking a steady retreat. Script part separator equals. I didn't sleep that night. The rain continued to fall, matching the tears that wouldn't stop streaming down my face. 4 hours, I sat in my chair, staring at family photos that now felt like artifacts from someone else's life. There was Clara at her college graduation, beaming as I stood proudly beside her. Clara on her first day at Vanetti Enterprises, nervous but determined. Clara and me at the company's 30th anniversary gala, champagne glasses raised in celebration. When had it all changed? When had my little girl transformed into this cold-eyed stranger? By morning, I'd moved from shock to something else, a slow-burning anger that straightened my spine as I made my way to the kitchen. 62 years on this earth had taught me one thing: nobody takes what's mine without a fight. I called my assistant Margaret, who'd been with me for over 20 years. "Cancel my appointments today," I told her. "And get me everything you can on the board members' recent activities. Meeting minutes, emails, phone records, anything." "Julia, what's happening?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "War," I replied simply. "Clara's trying to push me out." There was a long pause. "I was afraid of this," Margaret finally said. "She's been having private meetings for weeks. I thought it was about the Singapore expansion." "It seems my daughter has bigger plans than Singapore," I said bitterly. "I need to know who she's aligned with." "I'll have everything within the hour," Margaret promised. I spent the day poring over company documents, looking for anything that might give me leverage. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Tomas Rivera, our company's longtime legal counsel and one of my few true friends. "Margaret called me," he said, his weathered face grave as I let him in. "Tell me everything." I did, my voice growing steadier with each word. When I finished, Tomas was silent for a long moment. "Julia," he finally said, "there's something you should know. I wasn't going to tell you yet, but given the circumstances, I received a call from Clara's assistant last week. She wanted me to review some documents, confidentially." "What documents?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "A revised company structure. One where you're removed as CEO and majority shareholder." He hesitated. "And there was something else. Something that didn't make sense." "What?" "Financial transfers to offshore accounts. Large ones, dating back 6 months. All authorized with your electronic signature. == script part separator ===. My blood ran cold. "My signature? That's impossible. I haven't authorized any offshore transfers." Tomas nodded grimly. "That's what you thought. Someone's forging your authorization codes." "Clara, Eve spirited, de betrayal cutin de. Maybe. But this feels bigger than a power play. These transfers total nearly $18 million. That's not just pushing you out, that's criminal." I collapsed onto the sofa, the magnitude of what I was facing finally hitting me. My own daughter wasn't just trying to take my company, she was potentially framing me for financial crimes. "You need to act quickly," Tomas said, checking his watch. "The quarterly board meeting is in 3 days. If Clara has the vote she claims, you could be removed by Friday." "What can I do?" Fight, wifi fight. "I know someone, a forensic accountant who specializes in corporate fraud. And," he hesitated, "you might need a different kind of lawyer. My firm represents Venetti Enterprises, which means I may have a conflict of interest if this gets ugly." "E ora abandone-me tu?" I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. "Never," Tomas squeezed my hand. "But I'm bringing in someone who can help without restrictions. His name is Felipe Morales, brilliant attorney, specializes in corporate takeover defense. Traste-me, Julia. This isn't over." 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Felipe Morales in Tomas's private office downtown. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with intense eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Venetti," he said after listening to my story, "your daughter has made 3 critical mistakes. First, she moved too quickly. Second, she's created a paper trail with those transfers. And third," he smiled slightly, "she underestimated you." For the first time since Clara walked into my study, I felt a flicker of hope. == script part separator ===. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. Felipe worked tirelessly, assembling a team that included forensic accountants, cybersecurity experts, and private investigators. We set up a makeshift command center in my home office, away from prying eyes at Venetti headquarters. "These transfers," Felipe said, pointing to a complex flowchart on my dining room wall, "they all funnel through a holding company in the Cayman Islands before splitting into smaller amounts across 12 different accounts." "Can we prove Clara's involvement?" I asked. Felipe nodded grimly. The authorization codes were used from her private office computer. But there's something else that doesn't add up. These transfers started exactly 2 months after Clara began meeting regularly with Victor Harmon. The name hit me like a physical blow. Victor Harmon, the CEO of Harmon Industries? The same, Felipe confirmed. Our sources say they've been meeting at least twice weekly for the past 8 months. Suddenly, pieces started to fall into place. Harmon Industries was our biggest competitor, and Victor Harmon had tried to buy Venetti Enterprises 3 years ago. I had flatly refused his offer. She's not just pushing me out, I whispered. She's selling us to Harmon. Felipe's expression was grim. It appears so. And these transfers could be her payment, or insurance that you'd take the fall if anything went wrong. I felt sick. My own daughter. Mrs. Venetti, Felipe said firmly, we don't have time for grief right now. The board meeting is tomorrow, and we need to be ready. He was right. I straightened my shoulders and took a deep breath. What's our plan? We go in with everything we've found. But we hold back one key piece of evidence until the moment is right, Felipe explained. The element of surprise can be powerful in these situations. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my garden, watching the moon rise over the trees my late husband had planted. What would Richard think of what his daughter had become? What had I missed in raising her? Script part separator ===. My phone buzzed at 6 a.m. with a text from Felipe. New information. Coming over now. He arrived 20 minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept either, but there was an energy about him that hadn't been there before. We found something, he said, placing his laptop on my kitchen counter. The private investigator I hired managed to access Clara's personal email through a backup on her cloud storage. Is that legal? I asked. Felipe's smile was thin. Let's just say it's a gray area we can worry about later. Right now, you need to see this. He turned the screen toward me. It was an email exchange between Clara and Victor Harmon dated 6 months ago. I can guarantee the board votes, Clara had written. But I need assurances about my position after the acquisition. Harmon's reply made my blood boil. Once your mother is out and facing fraud charges, the board will have no choice but to approve the sale. You'll have the COO position we discussed, plus the offshore compensation. Just make sure the transfer records have Julia's signature. Iridite vice, my hand is shaking. They planned to frame me all along. There's more, Felipe said, scrolling down. Clara wasn't just meeting with Harmon. She was also secretly seeing board members, one by one, telling each a different story about your mental decline, about mistakes you supposedly made. I thought of our board, people I'd worked with for years, some I considered friends. And they believed her? She had fabricated evidence, Felipe explained. Altered financial reports, emails you never sent, recordings of conversations that were edited to change their meaning. The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. My own daughter had meticulously plotted my destruction. The board meeting starts at 10 a.m., I said, glancing at the clock. We have 3 hours to prepare. Felipe nodded. I've already called in a court reporter. Whatever happens in that boardroom will be on record. Good, I said, a steely resolve replacing my heartbreak. Because I'm not just fighting to keep my company anymore. I'm fighting for my freedom and my reputation. As I dressed for battle in my most powerful suit, I couldn't help wondering what else I didn't know about Clara. What had turned my daughter into someone capable of such calculated betrayal? Script part separator ===. We arrived at Venetti Enterprises headquarters at 9:30 a.m. The security guard's surprised expression when he saw me told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't expected me to show up. Good morning, Bill, I said pleasantly, signing in as I'd done thousands of times before. Mrs. Venetti, he stammered. I was told you wouldn't be, that is. Miss Clara said you were ill. As you can see, I'm in perfect health, I replied, holding his gaze until he looked away. Felipe and I took the private elevator to the executive floor. The tension in my chest grew with each passing floor. When the doors opened, Clara was standing at the reception desk, looking over some papers with my assistant Margaret. The shock on her face when she saw me was almost worth everything I'd been through. Mother, she said, recovering quickly. I didn't expect you today. I heard you were unwell. News of my illness has been greatly exaggerated, I replied coolly. I believe we have a board meeting to attend. Clara's eyes flickered to Felipe, clearly trying to place him. This is my attorney, Felipe Morales, he said. He'll be joining us today. The board meeting is private, mother. No outside counsel allowed without prior approval. Felipe stepped forward, all polite professionalism. Actually, Ms. Vanetti, as the majority shareholder and CEO, your mother has every right to bring counsel to any corporate meeting. It's outlined quite clearly in your company bylaws. Section 4, paragraph 7. Clara's face hardened. Fine. But this doesn't change anything. We'll see, I said, walking past her toward the boardroom. The board members were already seated around the massive oak table when we entered. 12 men and women, most of whom I personally recruited over the years. Some couldn't meet my eyes. Others looked confused by Felipe's presence. Julia, Thomas Blackwell, our chairman, stood to greet me. We weren't sure you'd be joining us today. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Thomas, I replied, taking my seat at the head of the table. I understand there are some concerns about my leadership that need to be addressed. Script part separator, Clara entered behind us, Victor Harmon at her side. The room tensed immediately. What is he doing here? I demanded. Mr. Harmon is here as my guest and advisor, Clara said smoothly. As I'll be explaining, we're considering a strategic partnership with Harmon Industries. I caught several board members exchanging glances. This clearly wasn't what they'd been told. Before we begin, Felipe interjected, I'd like to inform everyone that this meeting is being recorded by a certified court reporter for legal purposes. He gestured to a woman I hadn't noticed, sitting quietly in the corner with her stenography machine. Clara's confident smile faltered. That's not necessary. On the contrary, I cut in. Given the serious nature of today's discussion, an accurate record seems prudent. Thomas Blackwell cleared his throat. Let's proceed with the agenda. Clara has requested a vote of no confidence in the current CEO. That's you, Julia. On what grounds? I asked, though I knew the answer. Clara opened a folder and began distributing documents. Financial irregularities, declining performance, and questionable decision-making that puts the company at risk. I watched the board members reviewing the papers, their expressions growing concerned. These reports show unauthorized transfers to offshore accounts, Clara continued. All signed with Mother's authorization code. Furthermore, our Singapore expansion is hemorrhaging money because of her outdated approach. She was good, mixing truth with lies, real business challenges with fabricated misdeeds. No wonder the board had been swayed. Mr. Blackwell, I said calmly when she finished, before you vote, I believe my attorney has some information relevant to these accusations. Felipe stood, setting his own folders on the table. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've been shown is a carefully constructed fraud. Not perpetrated by Mrs. Vanetti, but against her. Script part separator, He began distributing his own documents, forensic analyses of the transfers, IP traces, and email exchanges. The transfers in question weren't authorized by Julia Vanetti, Felipe explained, his voice steady and authoritative. They were executed using her credentials, yes, but from a computer registered to Clara Vanetti. We have the digital forensics to prove it. Clara's face drained of color. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly. We also have evidence, Felipe continued, speaking over her, of regular meetings between Ms. Clara Vanetti and Victor Harmon dating back 8 months. Meetings that were never disclosed to the board or to Mrs. Vanetti. Victor Harmon stood abruptly. I won't sit here and be accused of. Please, Mr. Harmon, I said, finding strength in my voice I didn't know I had. You haven't been accused of anything yet. The emphasis on yet wasn't lost on anyone in the room. What exactly are you suggesting? Thomas Blackwell asked, looking between Clara and me. Felipe pulled out what I knew was our trump card, printed copies of the email exchange we'd discovered. I'm suggesting, Mr. Blackwell, that Clara Vanetti and Victor Harmon conspired to remove Mrs. Vanetti as CEO by framing her for financial crimes, with the ultimate goal of selling Vanetti Enterprises to Harmon Industries at a fraction of its value. Clara slammed her hand on the table. This is absurd. Mother is clearly desperate, fabricating evidence because she can't accept that her time is over. Is this email fabricated? Felipe asked quietly, sliding a copy in front of each board member. Your own words, Mestre Vanetti. Planning to frame your mother for fraud so the board would have no choice but to approve the sale. Planning your compensation package with Harmon while betraying your family legacy. The room fell deathly silent as everyone read the damning exchange. Script part separator, Clara stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. These emails are taken out of context. Mother has always been paranoid about losing control. She's manipulating you all. I stared at my daughter, barely recognizing the woman before me. Clara, stop. It's over. Victor Harmon was already edging toward the door. I think we should continue this discussion with our legal teams present. Sit down, Mr. Harmon, Felipe commanded with surprising authority. There's more. He nodded to the court reporter, who handed him another folder. Board members, these documents show the true financial status of Vanetti Enterprises. As you'll see, the company is performing exceptionally well. The Singapore expansion isn't hemorrhaging money, as Ms. Vanetti claimed. It's exceeding projections by 23%. Thomas Blackwell removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes. Clara, is this true? Have you been deliberately misleading the board? Clara's composed facade was cracking. You don't understand. Mother was going to sell to our competitors. If found documents. More lies, interrupted softly. I've never considered selling this company. It is my life's work. It was meant to be your legacy. Your legacy. Clara laughed bitterly. You never saw me as anything but a caretaker for your precious company. It was never good enough, never trusted enough. The raw emotion in her voice took me by surprise. There was real pain there, beneath the betrayal. That's not true, I said, my voice catching. I've been preparing you to take over for years. On your timetable. Always your terms. Clara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Do you know what it is like living your shadow? The great Julia Vanetti's daughter, expected to be grateful for the crumbs of power you toss my way? Script part separator, The boardroom fell silent. The revelation of Clara's resentment engine in the air. For a moment, I saw my daughter, really saw her, perhaps for the first time in years. I never knew you felt that way, I said softly. Because you never asked, Clara shot back, but her voice had lost some of its edge. Thomas Blackwell cleared his throat. Regardless of personal feelings, these documents suggest serious ethical breaches, possibly criminal activity. Victor Harmon was now standing by the door. This meeting is clearly hostile. I'm leaving. Actually, Felipe said, pressing a button on his phone, you might want to wait. The boardroom door opened, and two men in suits entered. Victor Harmon. I'm Special Agent Davis with the FBI. We'd like to ask you some questions about wire fraud and corporate espionage. Clara's face went white. FBI. What is this? I filed a federal complaint yesterday, I explained, my heart breaking even as I said the words. The evidence was too serious to ignore. You called the FBI on your own daughter? Clara whispered, betrayal in her eyes. No, I corrected. I called them on criminals who were stealing from my company. I had hoped you weren't involved as deeply as it appears. The second agent approached Clara. Ms. Vanetti, we have some questions for you as well. Clara looked desperately around the room, finding no allies. Mother, please. You can't let this happen. The time for that was before you decided to frame me for crimes I didn't commit, I said, surprised at how steady my voice was despite the pain tearing through me. Script part separator, As Clara was escorted from the boardroom, her final glance at me contained something I couldn't quite name. Rage, fear, perhaps even a flicker of remorse. The board members sat in stunned silence as the door closed behind her. Thomas Blackwell was the first to speak. Julia, we had no idea. Clara came to us with convincing evidence. She manipulated all of us, I said, suddenly feeling every one of my 62 years. She found your pressure points and exploited them. The emergency board meeting that followed was brief and unanimous. All allegations against me were withdrawn, and a special committee was formed to investigate the full extent of Clara and Victor Harmon's conspiracy. As Felipe and I left the building, reporters were already gathering in the lobby, alerted by who knows what source about the drama unfolding at Venetti Enterprises. No comment at this time, Felipe stated firmly, guiding me through the crowd to a waiting car. Once inside, I finally allowed myself to break down. Great, heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep inside me. Felipe sat quietly, handing me tissues but offering no empty reassurances. What happens now? I finally asked when I could speak again. Legally, Clara and Harmon will face serious charges. The money trail alone is damning. And my daughter? Will she go to prison? Felipe's expression softened. That depends on many factors. Her level of cooperation, whether she makes restitution. I nodded, staring out the window at the city I built my empire in. Take me home, please. I need to think. Script part separator, The next 3 days passed in a blur. I barely left my bedroom, unable to face the empty spaces of the house where Clara's childhood photos still hung on the walls. Margaret came by with food I couldn't eat and updates I didn't want to hear. The media was having a field day with the story, headlines screaming about corporate betrayal and the Venetti family drama. On the 4th day, Felipe arrived with a thick folder and a determined expression. You need to pull yourself together, Julia, he said, setting coffee in front of me. Clara's attorney has reached out. They want to discuss a plea deal. I looked up sharply. What kind of deal? She'll provide evidence against Harmon, return the offshore funds, and resign from Venetti Enterprises permanently. And in exchange, Felipe hesitated. Reduced charges. Probation instead of prison time. He stared into my coffee cup. She betrayed me, Felipe. She tried to destroy everything I built. Yes, he said simply. And now you have to decide what justice looks like for you. That afternoon, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found Richard's old friend and attorney, George Hammond, standing there with a weathered leather briefcase. Julia, he said gently. I've been trying to reach you. George. What are you doing here? He looked uncomfortable. It's about Richard's will. There's something you need to see, something I should have shown you years ago. My stomach tightened. What are you talking about? Richard's will was executed after his death 10 years ago. Not all of it, George said, pulling a sealed envelope from his briefcase. Richard left this with instructions that it only be opened if Clara ever tried to take control of the company against your wishes. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. How did Richard know? George looked away. He had concerns about Clara's ambition. He saw things that perhaps you didn't want to see. Inside my living room, I broke the seal on the envelope. Inside was a letter in Richard's handwriting and a legal document. As I read, my heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. My dearest Julia, Richard had written. If you're reading this, then my fears about our daughter have proven true. Clara has always wanted power more than she wanted wisdom. I've created this amendment to my will as a safeguard against the worst of her impulses. The legal document spelled it out clearly. While Clara had inherited Richard's shares in Venetti Enterprises upon his death, this codicil created a trust that would revert ownership of those shares back to me if Clara ever attempted to seize control of the company or sell it without my consent. She never knew, George explained. Richard made me promise not to reveal this unless absolutely necessary. 2 days later, I sat across from Clara and her attorney in Felipe's office. She looked thinner, her designer clothes replaced by a simple blouse and slacks. Her eyes were red-rimmed but defiant. I've agreed to the plea deal, she said without preamble. I'll testify against Victor. I'll return the money. I nodded, saying nothing. Is that all you have to say? She demanded, a flash of the old Clara breaking through. What would you like me to say? I asked quietly. That you hate me. That you'll never forgive me. Something. I placed Richard's letter on the table between us. Your father knew this day might come. Clara picked up the letter, her face growing paler with each line she read. The trust document behind it made her physically recoil. This can't be legal, her attorney interjected. I assure you, it is, Felipe responded. fully executed and notarized. Clara looked up at me, truly shocked for the first time. You're taking everything. No, I said firmly. I'm protecting everything, from you and from myself. Clara's confusion was evident. I had Felipe draw up new papers, I explained. The trust will control the company. You and I will both report to an independent board of trustees. Neither of us can seize control or sell without unanimous approval. Why would you do this? She whispered. Because despite everything, you're still my daughter. And someday, when you've earned it, this company should still be your legacy too. As I walked out of that office, I felt lighter somehow. The future was uncertain, the damage profound. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I might eventually find peace. Not in victory or revenge, but in wisdom. And perhaps, someday in forgiveness.